Good morning. I'm Sidney Porter from the Health Physics Society History Committee, and it's Tuesday morning, June 18th, 2002, and it's my distinct pleasure to be videotaping one of the people that has contributed a great deal to our society and is a fine health physicist with a rich and varied experience, and that's Keith Dinger. Keith, I'm hoping that you can start off by telling us about your early background and your introduction to college and the profession, so to speak.
Okay, thanks, Sid. It's a pleasure to be here. My early career started with my undergraduate work at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, where I ended up being a physics major and graduated with a bachelor's degree in physics. I went to Miami on a scholarship from the Navy. It was a Navy ROTC scholarship, which essentially was the same terms of contract as going to the academy, but it was in an ROTC unit at Miami. While at Miami, I studied, as I said, physics, and upon graduation, then I was commissioned an officer in the Navy. Having gone through a interview with Admiral Rickover, which I first failed and then was passed, I was accepted in the Navy Nuclear Propulsion Program. Went to nuclear power school and submarine school, which in those days was a year and a half of schooling, and then went into the fleet on a fast attack submarine in the Pacific for the remainder of 4.5 years.
And which submarine was that?
I was on the USS Flasher, the SSN 613. It was a Thresher class submarine that actually was on the building ways when the Thresher went down, and it was redesigned while on the building ways and became one of 3 unique fast attacks in the Navy. I retired and resigned my commission from Hawaii. I was stationed
What year
in
was
Hawaii.
that?
That was in 1971. Came back to the States, went into the job market looking to go into the nuclear power industry in some aspect, and took a position at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or in Kittery, Maine, depending on what your politics are. But I went in there as an electrical engineer in charge of the radiation instrumentation program. I was the...
and by the way, you had extensive training in nuclear power school on this radiation instrumentation to begin with, and then 4 years experience using it, correct?
That's correct. I did have, while on the submarine, I was the reactor controls division officer and the electrical division officer, and we maintained and were responsible for the instrumentation, both the reactor instrumentation and the portable instrumentation.
And Bobby, did you get an RO, reactor operators? Did you go through our school itself?
Well, yes, I was qualified. It was called Engineering Officer of the Watch, which meant I was qualified to be the watch officer and the reactor plant, and was qualified as a submarine officer of the deck. So I was a fully qualified submarine officer upon leaving the Navy.
And reactor operator.
And well, actually, reactor operator was an enlisted position. I was as the engineering officer of the watch, I was the supervisor of the reactor operator and electrical plant operator and the steam propulsion plant operator. So,
because this is important, because later on when one is in charge of health physics, if you have the actual operations experience,
Absolutely.
It makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
As to your ability to really perform effective health physics.
Absolutely. And in my training as on the nuclear power plant and upon its operation, it just held me in excellent stead when I got to the shipyard and became involved in the health physics aspects. The knowledge of the reactor plant itself was just invaluable to help me do my job better, having a more basic understanding of where the sources were, what generated the sources of the radiation radioactivity, and it was a knowledge that kind of set me apart from a lot of the health physicists that I was working with.
That's my point.
Yes.
And so what that did is that gave you a base information level which held you in good stead for the rest of your association with the nuclear power program.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's so important that one get this. And unfortunately, an awful lot of the young people coming in don't have that, and they really suffer greatly from not having the operational knowledge of the plant itself, in my opinion.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And also I would say that one other thing that the nuclear propulsion program really taught us, or you became accustomed to, was not just stopping at the facts that are enough to have you do your job, but understanding all of the underlying assumptions and all of the underlying science that goes into what you're doing. I worry about health physicists and actually many of the sciences that kind of skim the top, is what I call it, without understanding the underlying concepts and the underlying assumptions. And I think there's a a real potential hazard in not understanding the physics of how a detector works, rather than just the fact that it does work. And
Exactly.
I'm worried that that discipline of understanding all of the basic physics and science of what it is you're doing is a little bit lost, and I'm not sure it's ingrained in a lot of our health physicists today. But in the Naval Reactors program, they started at ground zero, and to be a reactor operator, to be a supervisor reactor operator, we had to do calculations of core power distributions in the reactor. Now that has nothing to do with operating a switch that pulls rods in and out, but you had to understand the science of how reactors go critical and what makes them, and to do the hard math calculation to decide if it's going to go critical. And so that kind of discipline, I think, has held me in good stead,
Right.
too.
And so anyway, you went in as an electrical engineer into Portsmouth, and what happened then?
Well, I went as an electrical engineer. I actually went into the gate when there was an awful lot of people going out the gate. We were in the shipyard was in the process of a large downsizing. 3 months after arriving there, in December of 1971, as when I arrived in March of '72, there was a large reduction in force scheduled, and electrical engineers were being hit very heavily. And my supervisor got me converted and designated as a nuclear engineer. Now, the standard was usually you had to be an engineer at the shipyard for a year before you would be a designated nuclear engineer. But my supervisor, because of my experience in the Navy, got me to become a nuclear engineer in civil service roles. And they weren't being riffed or reduced in force, and therefore I was able to stay employed through that reduction in force. And I then was classified as a nuclear engineer for 3 years. I managed the radiation instrumentation program. I served as the Navy's cognizant engineer for a number of the key instruments that are used throughout the Navy. The basic gamma survey instrument, people out in the Navy knows it as an ANPDR-27. The Frisker that we use.
Yeah, we started with a 27C on the Nautilus.
Yeah.
I don't know what you were up to.
Oh, I think it was up to about a G or H by the time that I was there in the 70s. But that's where I really got introduced to health physics as a profession. I came really from out of the physics and through the engineering aspects in the Navy Nuclear Propulsion Program. But then started learning about health physics, radiation detection, instrumentation, became totally enamored by the diversity of the health physics aspects, and started studying, even though I was just responsible for the instrumentation, started studying more into the whole discipline of health physics, so just on my own, learning what it was about. I worked very closely with one of my main customers, if you will, within the shipyard, was the Radiation Health Division, which is the division of health physicists that ran the radioisotope lab, did all the dosimetry, internal and external. And they were one of my, of course, prime customers from an instrumentation standpoint, and became very good friends with the director of radiation health that was there at the time.
Who was that, by the way?
His name was Alex Mutton.
Mm-hmm.
He was a certified health physicist, certified industrial hygienist, and he was actually one of the, I think, founders in the health physics business, at least in the New England area. Alex retired 3 years after I had arrived, and I applied for, but also was asked to temporarily fill in his job until it was filled, and then I became, on a permanent basis, the director of radiation health, and that was in 1975.
And so you had a fairly large staff at that point.
I did. We had a division. Of course, in the government, your size always goes up and down, you know, as the economy goes up and down. But I had a division that was basically between 16 and 20 people. Most of those health physicists, professionals. We had about 6 technicians that were in the dosimetry, external dosimetry area. So I became fully involved in health physics as the director of radiation health. And
You also
I
had an
went-
environmental monitoring program too, by
Yes,
the way.
we did the environmental monitoring program. That's correct.
And so I don't know how many people you had assigned to that, but that had to be, it was becoming more and more important with time, it seems to me, back then.
Yes, it was. In the late 70s is when what I call moving outside the fence line became the thing that we had to do. We had always been a profession, and also even in the in the shipyard business had been inside the fence doing our business. But in the late 70s, the public became much more aware of environmental issues. It was the war, Vietnam War had ceased, and environment became kind of an issue for people to now to focus on and be interested in. So that became very important.
And when did the
in those years.
leukemia studies raise its ugly head, if you will?
Well, that was interesting. In order to learn how to really be a health physicist, I went back to school, the program at Harvard School of Public Health, and I was
And
told.
that was when?
That was in 1977. I started in that fall, 77. And I continued to work at the shipyard. It was a joint work schooling situation.
Which is
And-
really nice, to be able to keep your job and go to graduate school at the
Yes,
same time.
yes, I was very
It's a
fortunate.
real luxury.
I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time for that. It happened one Sunday morning, February 19th, 1978. The Boston Globe Sunday edition had a large expose by their Spotlight investigation team that shipyard radiation workers were dying of leukemia at 6 times the rate of the general public and 2 times the rate of other cancers. And there was, just as you can imagine, shortly after that, a large media feeding frenzy
Started,
on this federal government institution that was irresponsibly causing injuries and deaths among its workers. It just so happened that the Congress, the Senate at the time, was holding hearings related to atomic weapons testing and potential health effects on the downwinders, et cetera. And so the Navy was quickly added into those hearings that were in progress as the paper was issued. And the Navy, Admiral Rickover and some of his staff members, Murray Miles, went and testified. And out of those hearings, congressional hearings, the Congress ordered the Centers for Disease Control to do a epidemiological study at Portsmouth. And so that all evolved in the month of February of 1978.
So that was a pivotal month for you for learning about the power of the press, wasn't
Very much, very much. It was one of those, every crisis is an opportunity, and that became my opportunity. As it so happened, I, at school, at Harvard School of Public Health, had become very interested in biostatistics and epidemiological areas. Although I was studying radiological sciences, I had taken, just the month before, signed up for elective courses on occupational environmental epidemiology from Professor Rothman at the school at the time. And so I was actively studying epidemiology when all this broke.
That's amazing. And by the way, didn't you take some classes from the well-known Jack Shapiro?
Oh, yes. Jack Shapiro was, of course, my professor for basic radiation protection and health. Dr. Moeller was actually Dade Moeller was my mentor and continues to be
You can't
my
have a
mentor
better
and friend.
mentor than
No.
that, of course. He's the best.
No, and one of the best things about this profession was I grew to become a friend and colleague of Dr. Moeller's.
Oh, your Dade's quite a person, isn't he?
Yes, yes.
Amazing person. So is Jack Shapiro, and I guess you know that Jack was a colleague of mine at Electric Boat Company during the Nautilus, Seawolf, Patrick Henry days back in the middle 50s.
Yes.
We were together working in various areas of radiological health.
I knew that.
And that of course was invaluable for Jack to have that actual practical experience of solving problems.
Yes.
And under Rickover, it's known as the hard way often.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so anyway, and of course the Harvard School of Public Health is world famous for its excellence in radiological health, and has been for many years. And so you were incredibly fortunate to be able to do that while working at Portsmouth.
Yes, that's right.
I'm very envious that you were able to do it that way.
I was very
that really
fortunate.
is wonderful. And so what a wonderful, technical background that the nuclear power school, combined with that, really gives you an incredible educational background to pursue your profession of health physics. Now let's go on. What happened with these epi studies on leukemia at Portsmouth?
As I said, Congress mandated a study by the Centers for Disease Control, which was actually done by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. They have a biological evaluation assessment branch in Cincinnati. And so we had an epidemiological study done by the NIOSH group, and they were just a superb group of professionals and epidemiologists. It was very interesting on the public aspects of it. The union became very involved. The shipyard workers union became very involved to ensure that there was not a cover-up. Now, this was just 3 years after Watergate, and so there was a lot of distrust for the government at the time. So there was a panel of oversight, of a technical advisory panel set up, and the union was allowed to pick 3 people to be on this panel. The NIOSH was allowed to pick 3 people, and the Senate was allowed to pick 3 people. And it was a very interesting advisory panel. The union's choices were Dr. Casey Morgan and Dr. Mancuso from Pittsburgh, who was involved in exposing the Hanford and criticizing or critiquing the Hanford worker situation, and a Dr. Brose from Roswell Park in New York. And the other 6 consisted of also some very well-known experts, Warren Sinclair among the others. Okay. So it was, from a public standpoint, I was a young fledgling health physicist just learning what the word meant, and to be able to sit, or to have to sit, across the table from Warren Sinclair, Herb Parker, Casey Morgan, and the likes of those experts, in the room, was really quite an opportunity, and so it was.
And knowing Casey Morgan at that point, and also the other 2 people that the union had, you had some formidable adversaries there,
yes,
if you will.
We did.
Who knew how to ask the questions about the soft spots, and every study has soft spots, no matter what it is.
Yes, it does. And out of those, it turned out Dr. Brose from New York became the real, the strong critic.
Well, he's the one that knew the epi out of the 3, is the point.
Yes, he was the biostatistician in the group. That's right. The study did get completed. Actually, 3 studies ended up coming out of the CDC's work. One was the cohort study, which clearly refuted the Boston Globe's article, which was based on work by a Dr. Najarian, who was worked in a veterans hospital. He's a hematologist working in a veterans hospital outside of Boston at the time. The cohort study clearly refuted Dr. Najarian's study, and there was actually some follow-up work done to find why the difference, what went wrong, and it turned out to be a bias introduced by recall. Dr. Najarian's technique for deciding if somebody was a radiation worker or not was to call the next of kin and say, did they wear a badge? And it turned out that the misclassification through recall accounted for the entire apparent excess.
Now, did the Boston Globe do justice to this repudiation of their early accusation?
It was not reported in the Boston Globe.
Oh, wow. Talk about the power of the press.
The one thing that was reported was there were follow-up Senate hearings, and actually Senator Kennedy chaired a hearing in which Dr. Najarian was asked to explain, or to agree with the follow-up studies, and also actually follow-up work that his own statistician, who was Dr. Coulter from Dartmouth, was a very reputable statistician, had reanalyzed the data and had actually at an epidemiological society meeting said that the data was not correct in the initial study. And upon reanalysis of the data, that the apparent leukemia had pretty much gone away. So Senator Kennedy had hearings to investigate this reanalysis by his own statistician, and Dr. Najarian just sat there and said, I just in my heart feel that radiation is dangerous. And Senator Kennedy just blew a fuse and yelled at him and says, I'm not going to have a profit unnecessarily scaring my constituents, because we had a fair number of Massachusetts people working at the shipyard. That got press in the Boston Globe, but the actual study from CDC did not. We never got coverage.
Which is it's terrible that there's such bias in the press.
But that's the system, and that's the
That's true.
public media
So
system
it was a
we
real
have to
learning
understand.
experience, wasn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it was. That shipyard study grew into just the Portsmouth experience grew into a shipyard study by Johns Hopkins. The Department of Energy commissioned a study of all nuclear shipyards by Johns Hopkins, and it's now what's known as the Naval Nuclear Shipyard Worker Study.
Which was a very important EPI study.
Yes, it was. It unfortunately has never reached the peer press. It exists as a DOE report, but it never found its way into any peer reports. And it was largely the primary investigator, Dr. Gene Matinowski at Johns Hopkins, frankly ran out of funding, and it never found its way into the light of peer epi press, which is
But actually, that was a much larger study than the Portsmouth study.
Absolutely, yes.
And the more important study because of the power of statistics.
That's correct. There's an interesting point in that study, though. And I think today still continues to be the largest radiation occupational study of a single group of cohort of workers.
Of people that were actually exposed.
Actually exposed, and for which there was very
Good dosimetry.
reliable dosimetry. And it's strictly an external source, and so it had all the advantages of a good study. But even the power of that study, as strong as it was, it's still not powerful enough to see an effect.
Low-level effects.
Low-level effects, if they in fact do exist. And so
Right. Yeah,
that's a lesson in the power of epidemiological studies.
I do remember the number from EPI classes that if we want to see 100 milligram, we need to see 100 million people.
Yes. Those are
You know, and the cost of 100 million people EPI study is something that nobody can, not even the U.S. can afford.
and not just the cost, it just physically is not feasible for, to find those many records to track them
Yes,
down.
exactly.
And that kind of thing.
So what was the next big thing that happened to you? This all happened in the middle 70s, I guess.
It started in the late 70s, 1978. It grew in the CDC actually published their report in 1980, and I became one of the Navy's individuals that assisted as a manner of answering questions to the Johns Hopkins study, which actually proceeded for 10 years. And so they completed their study in the late 80s. So this epidemiological studies was actually my collateral duty for
a lot of years.
For a lot of years, almost up until 1990. Through that work, I also then became to be used by the Naval Reactors program, although I was just at the shipyard, became used program-wide to help with projects related to claims for compensation.
So you got to know Murray Miles very well.
Yes, I did. He became a professional mentor.
And he's
more
quite an
of
amazing person.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
And by the way, you and I had known about each other for a lot of years, but I believe it was a collateral duty of yours in 1979 that brought us face to face at the 3 Mile Island accident site in the fairly early days, as I remember, of
that's right.
of that accident when we met face to face and
Yes.
and interacted. And of course, TMI needed a lot of help. And why don't you tell us about your relationship with that?
Well, it was my opportunity to come and meet the famous Sid Porter that whose papers I had read of and knew well of professionally, but we'd never met. But after 3 Mile Island, there was, as you know, a large contingency of consultants that were brought in
after the accident.
After the accident, excuse me, yeah. TMI still exists.
Right.
But after the accident, there was a large contingency of consultants that were brought in and set up a trailer park across the river. And part of those consultants that came in was a group initially from Electric Boat under a contract to assist actually Northeast Utilities in emergency response capabilities, a group called the Radiological Support Group under the leadership of Bill Graber.
The old EB gang.
The old EB gang. Was brought in to assist in the in-plant radiological recovery actions, just setting up contamination instrumentation, setting up monitoring, internal dosimetry capabilities and things like that. So when Bill Graber came in, the EB group came in, Graber said he would like some more help, and so he actually got Med Ed and GPU to ask Admiral Rickover Rickover would detail some people for help. Well, Admiral Rickover was not in a position to allocate federal resources to a commercial utility.
And I imagine he didn't want to do that.
And he didn't want to do that. And if he doesn't want to do something, he lets you know he didn't. So the outshot of it was that the NRC ended up making a formal request to Naval Reactors.
So it's a federal agency asking a federal agency.
Federal agency
Very
asking
different
a federal
matter.
agency. And it was actually, they actually asked Admiral Rickover's Atomic Energy Commission hat. At that time, still IRDA, it was, you know, an IRDA hat that he wore, asked them to help with the emergency response. And so Admiral Rickover agreed to send 6 people for 30 days. And I was one of the 6 that was asked to come. I was the health physicist that came in, and he also brought in some radiological engineers, some Alara engineering people to help across the board. But I was the radiation or the health physicist that came. And we met, got involved in some of the environmental monitoring that you were doing, but was primarily involved in plant, setting up procedures for frisking people out, internal monitoring, and it was quite a growth opportunity in my profession.
Yeah, I think it was an incredible learning opportunity.
It absolutely was, and I was in the process that, as you know, occurred the last week of March 1979. And I arrived the first week of April. The 6 of us came in the first week of April. But in June of that year, of 1979, I was scheduled to take my oral boards for certification.
For the American Board of Health Physics?
For the American Board of Health Physics. I had taken the written exam in Minneapolis, had passed well the Part 2 aspect, you know, the essays, but was multiple questions short of a clear certification. So Mike Terpelak at the time, who was the chair of the American Board of Health Physics and was at FDA, asked me to take the oral exam, and he preferred me to do that rather than taking the written exam. And so I agreed to take the oral exam in Philadelphia at the meeting. And so my studies for the oral board were interrupted by responding to 3 Mile Island, but I found that helped more than it hindered. And went on then from 3 Mile Island, my few weeks there, very quickly down to the meeting in Philadelphia, took my oral exam.
And passed it and became certified.
Became certified in 1979.
In 1979, which is an important part of your, you know, just the steps in your professional career, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And were you at that point the only certified health physicist at Portsmouth?
I was, and I was the only one certified at Portsmouth, and that same year, 1979, another health physicist in the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program at Charleston Naval Shipyard, Sam Keith, became certified also, and the 2 of us became the only 2 certified health physicists in the entire Naval Shipyard complex.
But that staff that you had, though, it was a good staff. You know, they were seasoned, and they gave you great support. And I think it's so important that in the job that you had, that you have an able staff, because the staff are the people that do the real work that has to be done. Who was your number 2 man there?
Well, over the years it changed a couple times, but when I ended up, my number 2 man was John Saladay, who's active in the society these days and is a certified health physicist. But I had you know, a couple different people through the years that were my main support.
And so you were beginning to be active in the society at that point too. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I actually became active in the society as soon as I became the director of radiation health in 1975. I started to find out what health physics meant, and I found that there was a chapter of the Health Physics Society. Immediately joined the New England chapter of the Health Physics Society. And that's, I guess, one of my professional career altering moves too, was to go to a New England chapter meeting, Health Physics Society. I timidly walked in to see what a health physicist looked like and what they did. And I found myself sitting at a table with some people called Ken Scrable, Jack Shapiro, and George Chabot and Frank Massey, all sitting at the same table.
What an incredible group of people.
And they just conversed with me as if we had been friends for years, and were interested in the work at the Portsmouth. And I obviously was enthralled to hear about their work, although I'd already known them well by reputation. And so it was just astounding to me that networking capability was there immediately upon walking into the door and having a dinner. And so I just realized that the Health Physics Society was just going to be a very important part of professional development if I was going to do that. And so I became active in the chapter, served as the chapter director for a few years, and then as the president in the early 80s, I think 81 to 82, I was president of the New England chapter. I became, through the chapter, really introduced to the National Society, and I went to my first meeting in Atlanta. I think it was 1977, the Atlanta meeting, and was again just enthralled with the technical program. I said, how can you be a health physicist and not be here learning all this? In fact, it was interesting in Atlanta. My big problem was I had the schedule, and I couldn't decide out of the 3 sessions that were running concurrently, how do you pick which one you want to go to? And
it's still a problem.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And it's a pleasant problem because you have so much you want to do. And I found myself running between meetings, and I saw a number of people sitting in the hallways leaning against the rail and talking. I said, how can they be there talking? Why aren't they in these meetings? Well, as the years go on, I find myself sitting in the hallway talking, but it's society business, it's professional business,
yes,
and so I understand it. But so the society just captured me as a necessary professional.
And when did you first become a board member?
I became a board member in 1988. I had just finished serving as chair of the membership committee. I started by getting on the membership committee. Served as the chair of that for the last 2 years of my 3-year term, and Jim Watson was the president my last year, and he was just a wonderful encourager and mentor into the society. And so I was actually encouraged to run for the board by Frank Massey. Now, in the New England chapter, Frank and I became very good friends, and he became a society mentor for me, if you will. And Frank kind of drugged me along and drugged me into onto the ballot, and I found myself as a board member in 1988.
And you were on the board for a number of years now, weren't you?
I was director for the 3 years of the directorship. I actually agreed to run for secretary-elect at the end of my term, and did not get it. I was beaten by some fellow by the name of Ray Johnson, who today we're the closest of friends, and I thank him for that being one of the best moves that ever happened, was beating me for secretary-elect. But the next year I allowed my name to be put in for the treasurer, was elected as the treasurer, served 3 years, and then allowed my name to be put in for president, and was elected for the 3-year presidential stint. And
you were still at Portsmouth at that time?
I was at Portsmouth through that time.
Because it's got to be difficult going through president-elect and president when you have a full-time job.
Well, actually, as it turned out, when I was put on the ballot, as I was in the treasurer's term, I actually retired from the shipyard and went into consulting. I had enough years. There was early retirement offered because of the downsizing, and I took that advantage and went into consulting. I became associated with the Harvard School of Public Health. And you are exactly right. Had I not left the shipyard and tried to, I could not have been in the president's position and still been employed at the shipyard. It's just is a very hard thing. And those that are able to maintain the full-time job and be the president are just astounding people. So I ended up, for a number of years after leaving the shipyard, although running some continuing education courses at Harvard and doing some consulting as a NEVLAP assessor for dosimetry systems, spending an awful lot of time on the society, but it was time extremely well spent because I wouldn't have gotten all the professional experiences that I did without the society, and so I was pleased to try to help pay back through some volunteership.
And since you were president, then president-elect, and then president, and then immediate past president, I mean, those are 3 intense years as far as the society is concerned.
Yes, they are. Very intense.
And that was when were you past president? I'm trying to think of the timing here.
My presidential year was from 1998 to 1999, and so from 99 to 2000, I was past president.
And then since then, you've been very active also.
Yes, it turned out that one of the things that was exciting to watch was the growth of the society into outreach to the public and into the public arena. We, as a society, had been really very introspective for a lot of years. And really, in the years that I just had become treasurer, Keith Shiger was the president. He kind of broke us out of the shell a bit and got the society involved in public roundtables that the EPA and the NRC were holding, participatory rulemaking for decommissioning standard. And Keith Shiger got a representative to go to each of these public roundtables, and that was kind of, in my opinion, the first time the society had really broken out of its shell. As a follow-on to Keith, it was decided we wanted to become more active as a society in the public arena, and we actually hired a consultant firm to become a public relations firm. And Ken Maltzman was the first president to have the benefit of this consultant firm. And Ken actually got to testify once or twice in Congress. It just happened that the human radiation experiment issue was going on.
Raised its ugly head.
Yeah, raised his head. And so Ken Maltzman got into Congress on behalf of the society, and it started us evolving into a public outreach. It was really a couple of years later under President Vedder's administration that we just weren't getting there. We were spending a fair amount of money and just weren't getting to the results that we wanted to. And so Rich Vedder really restructured our program, set up kind of a three-tiered thing in which we left the chapters and the members to do the grassroots public education. Rich has established two new positions, actually one new position, which was a liaison to the federal agencies. And he appointed Bill Mills, who was just ending his term as a past president, as the federal agency liaison. And then we hired another government relations firm to open the doors for the sitting president to go into Congress. And Rich Vedder kind of put that into place, and Otto Robbie followed him, and Otto just took that ball and ran wonderfully with it, and he really got the society into the national limelight with Cassini issue, missions and issues. The decommissioning standard was in Congress. The debate between the NRC and the EPA on their decommissioning standards was in Congress, and Dr. Abe took the society right into testimony there. And so he really set a standard, and I followed Otto, and I knew that my main mission as president was just to try to run half as fast as he had. And so we went through this evolution, and then Ray Johnson was president behind me, and he was a full-time worker and one of these heroes that held a full-time job and did the presidency also. But we found that we were into our third, fourth year of working in Congress, but there was a new person every year, a new face. And the executive committee was decided there needed to be a little more continuity in the congressional area, similar to that Bill Mills was providing in the federal arena. And so at the end of Ray Johnson's presidential term, he had set the groundwork for there to be established a new position called the Congressional Liaison. And President Rohr appointed me to that position, which I continue to hold today. And it's a position, again, to assist the president in just maintaining continuity and helping to make sure we have a continuous message in Congress, and just to be the technical advisor on those issues that we go to Congress on. And that, I think the society has been pleased with what we have been able to achieve in the public arena through this new system that Dr. Vedder had set up. We have a lot to do. It's not easy with volunteers.
Sure isn't.
But I think we are now known in by a number of members of Congress by name as a society that they can depend upon for third-party professional opinion, and without a request, actually for professional information, without an opinion being attached to it. So that's what I'm working on now on behalf of the society.
Well, that's very commendable, as a matter of fact, and you've set quite a precedence here for the society to continue. I might add.
Oh no, the precedence was set by my predecessors, and continues to be well maintained by my successors. So I'm just a product of the organization. And
but a person that's working hard to carry it on.
Yes, I am.
And would you you have any parting words for the for our newest members as far as where you see the society going?
Well, I
Keith?
guess my best advice would be to share my main lesson, which is that the Health Physics Society, if they are serious about contributing to their profession as a health physicist, that the Health Physics Society has to be an important and integral part of that professional development. The networking opportunities, we are not really a large group as a profession. And the networking opportunities with the grand masters of our profession are at their fingertips by just attending chapter meetings, by attending annual meetings of the society. And they will, by that, there's just such a synergistic effect. They will grow professionally in leaps and bounds that they won't achieve if they don't become a member of the society. And that, my advice is if you're serious about your profession, then be involved in the professional organization. And they'll be well repaid. And then the other one is what we started out with, is learn all the underlying science. Don't skim the top. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed talking
Thank
with
you.
you.
Thank you
Really
for inviting me.
have.
I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
And I should have a copy of this tape for you. You could be here Thursday morning.
Yes, we'll be.
Okay, I'll look
Be on
you up,
board
and
then.
hopefully we'll have a VCR copy of this tape for you.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Have enjoyed it.
Thank you. Likewise.